Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 5-time author, and I teach people how to write and publish powerful, thought-provoking nonfiction and memoir without overthinking or getting caught up in extreme overwhelm. Because your story and message matter, and it's about to become someone's very favorite resource. For more book writing, publishing, and how the heck do I move through this glitch tips and solutions, and plenty of free resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. Hello, and welcome to this next episode of Write the Damn Book Already. It's a new year, and there are so many amazing authors scheduled to come and chat with me on this podcast. I cannot wait to bring all of their stories to you. Next week, I'm speaking with Bethany Clemenson about her book, Ditching the Dream. I'm also speaking with Linda Sievertson about her newly released book, Beautiful Writers, which I'm halfway through. It's completely incredible. And then also next week, I'm going to be speaking with Laura Belgray about her book, which I was privileged to receive an advanced review copy of. Get a load of the title, people. Tough Titties. Like, that's literally the title. And the book is as fabulous, if not even more so, than the title. I cannot wait to talk to Laura about how it came to be, and I have some very specific questions about some very specific passages in the book. So I'm so looking forward to bringing all those conversations to you. Today, I had the amazing joy of talking with author Renata Trebing. Renata and I have been connected for some time now on Instagram. She is actually a nutrition coach and a chef, and she has catered some events for, amazingly, some of my clients, which, looking at the Instagram reel of what she's making, like, I need to be at those events. But she's got 2 books on the market now. Her first came out in August of 2021. It's mostly a cookbook. It's full of recipes. It's titled Nourish Your Body, a 30-day healthy and delicious meal plan. And I promise, once you start following Renata on Instagram, you're going to become like me, where you just DM her all the time going, where's this recipe? Where's this recipe? And then she'll DM back and say, it's in the cookbook. So just get the cookbook already, because the food is absolutely unbelievable. And her philosophy about cooking and food and nutrition and spirituality and how it all comes together is really fascinating, frankly. Her second book, which came out on 11/11 of 2022, proving that Renata and I are very similar when it comes to the magic of dates, is titled Heal Your Body, Mind, and Spirit, Your Ultimate Guide to Nourishing Your Body, Transforming Your Mindset, and Developing a Stronger Spiritual Connection. It was so fun to talk to Renata about both of these books because they were such different experiences for her. And if you've been listening to the podcast for any period of time, you probably already know. And if you haven't, I'm just going to tell you that all of my interviews are very conversational. I do not have a script. Like, we just go. We just have a conversation. And I love that approach because, for one thing, it allows my guests to just relax into a conversation. It's one of my not-so-secret tools for getting people unstuck when I coach them on book writing, because it's so common to say, well, Elizabeth, I'm stuck. And I go, okay, let's talk about it. And then it soon comes to pass through conversation that they're not actually stuck, or maybe they are stuck, and you know what? They just needed to talk it through. They just needed someone to ask them some simple, specific questions to help them think about something a different way. So I'm such a huge fan of just having a natural conversation. The amazing sound bites that come out of that are, in my opinion, most of the time, if not all of the time, better than any sound bite anybody could ever concoct ahead of time. So being able to talk to Renata about what she learned about herself while writing both of these books, how writing the second book was different from the first, what surprised her about the process in a good way and in a bad way, what was more challenging than she thought, what her biggest fears were. And what's fun, and I don't mean this in a masochistic way, is that almost every time, it doesn't surprise me what people's fears are. We all have the same fears. The challenge is that we think we're the only one who has them. And allowing that to stop us is just silly because we're all in this together. We're all experiencing it together. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I trust that you're going to. And all of Renata's information for following her and getting all of her amazing recipes and insights and thoughts and perspectives on spirituality and food and nutrition and how it all works together can be found in the show notes. All right, let's get to it. You have 2 books out now, right? And I'm so curious because when we chatted about doing this, you commented that you learned so much more after the second book was so different from the first book. And besides the obvious, because the first one was more cookbook style and the second one is more what I call transformative nonfiction. So besides the obvious difference, what did you mean by that?
Yeah. So this was a huge learning curve for me because just like you said, the first book, which is Nourish Your Body, a 30-day healthy and delicious meal plan, it just came about because all of my clients would get a meal plan. And that was one of the things that they loved because it was so tangible. It was literally like, put these ingredients together, make a thing, you eat it, it tastes good, you feel better, everybody wins, right?
Yes. And your I've messaged you multiple times because you have reels and whatever else on Instagram. And I message you and I'm like, I need this recipe. I need this recipe because it all looks so good. And I know it's so healthy. So I can understand where your clients, they want that too. Just like, Renata, tell me what to eat.
Yes, exactly. So it was an obvious progression from having these meal plans that only my clients would get to creating a cookbook where everybody could get it. And part of the cookbook too was some of the practices and check-ins that I do with my clients so that you could see a difference in your body, in your energy levels, if you went through the majority of the recipes in the cookbook. So that was obvious, right? Right. It was a labor of love because ever since I was like 7, 8 years old when I started reading cookbooks as a little girl. Yes. I was that really nerdy girl that like, I did not like to be outside playing. I wanted to be inside reading a cookbook. And then if you've ever read Nigella Lawson's books, which they're like novels, I mean, the way that she talks about food is so like ethereal almost. I mean, it becomes like this world, right? So I loved reading cookbooks like novels because of her. And so ever since then, I was like, oh, I really want to create my own cookbook. And then during COVID, that was when the idea came back up. And then I created it and it was amazing. And people are still buying it and, making the recipes amazing, right?
Right.
So then I knew that I had another book in me. I knew I had more to say. And what was so interesting was I had like a list of all these ideas of what I could write about for my second book. And I was like, yeah, I've got all these ideas. It's going to be awesome. And then I could never get started. I just felt like, I could write, or I could do something else that's way more interesting. So eventually what happened was I was talking to several different people and I was like, yeah, I want to write another book, but nothing's really popping up. And I was going through life. I mean, there were all kinds of things that were happening. Things were getting really stressful in my life because of lots of different reasons. And then I became really sick. And I share this in the book too, because this is really my gateway, not only into the book, but into me discovering what the second book was supposed to be. And that was my own health journey. And so becoming really physically ill, I ended up having the shingles. And the shingles, as you know, like super stressful, very painful thing to have. And I know so many people that said, oh my gosh, I had shingles too. It was awful.
I did too.
You did too?
I did.
Oh my gosh.
It was awful. It was about 10 years ago and it was on my ribs, on my right ribs. And it was awful. It was amazing how such a small, because mine wasn't physically in a huge area. I know people who have had it over a much larger part of their body. Mine wasn't. And it was amazing to me how much pain it caused in my body from such seemingly it'd be like a small cut and someone saying, my whole body hurts. But that was what it felt like. And it lasted. I remember I texted a friend who had it previously. And I asked, how long is this going to go on? And he said 2 to 3 months. And I was like, gosh, what? And it did. It was probably 8 to 10 weeks. And I was doing crazy amounts. My aunt, who's my godmother, is very good friends with a renowned practitioner, he does a lot of cancer research. And so he, at the time, doing vitamin C infusions and things like that wasn't being talked about. I don't even think Instagram was a thing. I mean, it's 10 years ago, right? How far we've come. But he told her to tell me to do all these things with high levels of vitamin C. And even still, I was doing that. And even still, it was 8 to 10 weeks.
Oh my God.
So yes, I understand.
So sorry.
Continue.
Well, funnily enough, and I'm sure because, in the book, I talk about this too. So for me, the rash from the shingles was on my right butt cheek.
Oh, that's a way to stand all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So literally, I mean, the first day that I realized something was wrong, I thought that I had just done such an amazing glute workout the day before because a friend of mine who's an amazing PT, she had sent me this workout and it was 45 minutes of glute exercises. And I thought, I'm just going to have the most amazing bubble butt, tomorrow. And the next day woke up with pain. And I was like, it must be because of the exercises. And then realized as the day progressed, I could not sit down. I was sitting here in this exact spot, but I kept shifting my weight to the other side because I couldn't put weight on it. And then the rash popped up and it looked terrible. And my husband got home and I was like, you have to look at my butt and not in a good way. You have to look at this rash.
And not in a good way. What all husbands and partners want to hear after a long day at work.
But yeah, so that's how we figured out I had shingles. But all that to say that I realized, I'm a nutrition coach. I'm someone that every day is working in this health and wellness field. And then to come down with shingles in such a painful and obvious way, something was up.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of deep introspection. I had to do a lot of my own healing journey, not just physically, which is very important, but also going into the mental, emotional, and spiritual healing too, in order to get better and not just get better, but to live my best life. And so that whole process eventually became the book.
It's so fascinating to me how many times I talk about this all the time with people, how we start at a macro level of what we want to write a book about. And at that point, it almost feels easy because we're so high level with it. It's I want to write a book about nutrition. I want to write a book about whatever. Then we start to take it to a micro level and get into the details of it. And that's when a lot of people start to go, I don't know, I'm not really feeling this. I'm not sure if this is a whole book. I don't know if I can really speak to this. But inevitably, something happens, whether it could be a pandemic, it could be your own illness, it could just be a mindset thing where something happens that actually is the book. And it's weird not to be woo about it, but it's almost like a gift from the universe to say, here it is. Because then you have to walk through the thing. If you're going to talk about nutrition and the importance of being lower stress and taking care of your body through food and those sorts of things, not that you weren't walking your walk, because I know you were, but it's it gives you a different perspective from which to do it, that all of a sudden you go, wow, this I want to do.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever feel though, what I hear from a lot of people is that when that happens, they start to feel a little bit fraudy. So for example, it's I'm a nutrition coach and yet I have shingles, or because you're not just a nutrition coach, you're also very good with the spiritual side of it, mindset, low stress, yoga, meditation, all those, you talk about all that stuff. So was there a piece of you that kind of thought, well, this is going to seem I don't know if I can come forward and say, I got shingles?
I think what was interesting for me was that I felt almost the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. So for me, I felt all these things are going on internally for me and had been going on for a while, right? Before anybody really knew that I had been sick or had the shingles, anything like that. And so for me, that was my truth. And I was so worried about sharing that with people through the book. And so really, I wrote it in my full truth. And then also I was completely petrified of anybody reading it.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
So it was really interesting because I had several friends say to me, during the pre-launch process, I didn't even know that you were writing a book. And I was like, yeah, I was kind of writing it on the down low because I wasn't really sure what people would think. I was so worried about people's judgment because, I mean, I do talk a lot about not just the physical body and gut healing and inflammation and all these things to reduce stress. Obviously, these are very well talked about in our society, but I also talk about the spiritual side, which for me is talking about meditation. It's talking about chakras, the energy centers, how that relates to different ailments you might be feeling in your body, because it absolutely resonated with me when I had shingles. And so I wanted to share that in a really, like, not to use a pun, but to use a pun, digestible way, right?
Right.
So I was then sharing really my philosophy with everybody through this book and was so worried that people would read it or look at it and be like, she's off her rocker. Like, she has no idea what she's talking about. She's crazy. Don't listen to her. Like, who knows what this lady's on, you know, all these things. So for me, it was kind of the opposite sensation where I was like, I held myself back a lot. And in terms of like the pre-launch process, I have reflected on that and know that part of why is because I was so afraid of what everybody would think.
So what do you think was the difference for you? Because this is so common between talking about this stuff on social media or in your emails even, and being comfortable doing it. Did you, I'm just going to ask you, did you feel the same level of fear when you did that?
Well, I was barely talking about it on social media.
Okay.
I had never talked about it on my emails. I hadn't even talked about it in any of my blog posts. So you can see, like, there was a big jump that I was making. So it was a completely new, I mean, this was like the beginning of a new era. Like, this was really like the calling card for like, here it is, guys. This is really me.
And okay, so how did that work out?
So
like, what was the biggest takeaway from that for you? I mean, was there pushback at all? And
none.
Zero.
In actual fact, what was so cool that I'm so thankful for it is so many women have messaged, texted me, sent me all different kinds of messages saying, like, literally, the world needs this book.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like completely floored. I thought, wow, what a testament to like feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and knowing it's really having a positive impact. I mean, I had a woman text me and she said, I'm literally 20 pages into your book and I love it. Like, literally, this is what the world needs. And to have people who have read like early copies of the book have such amazing reviews and talking about how it's like game changing, industry changing. I mean, like, these are all my wildest dreams. Could have never imagined that. And look at what happened.
Right. And I just think if you imagine back now to like, I actually thought about not doing this.
Yeah.
You know, what is the greatest, I don't want to say lesson but what's the biggest thing? I'm a firm believer that when we write books, we expand ourselves. Like, we learn things about ourselves. Sometimes they don't feel like awesome things in the moment. We uncover things about our fears and maybe why we did something the way we did it. What was something that you discovered about yourself while you were writing the second book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are two things that I learned. Number one is that each week with my book mentor, Lisa, we would sit down and have like a co-working session. And so that was really helpful in terms of structure, in terms of the really tangible things. Like, you have to get into a practice of writing. Otherwise, it's never going to get done, first and foremost. But two, You're going to be held back by that fear because you're stopping yourself from just typing, you know? Right. And so that was the first thing that I learned. The second was I thought it was so fascinating. It was almost like I was in two minds whilst writing, because it felt like it was just coming through me at times. Like, it was just like, I'm just writing these words. I'm not sure where they're coming from, but it's awesome. And so it was funny because I was aware that it was happening and it was happening at the same time. So it was kind of a cool sensation of like, wow, like, this must really be important. So I have to keep writing.
You're the first person who I've ever spoken with who has, without me saying it, verbalized the concept of letting the book come through you, not forcing it to come out of you.
Ooh, yes.
Like, you know, because we sit down and we think so much. What should I say? What do people want to hear? What's the right thing? How do I structure this? Do I do this chapter now? Do I tell this story? And there's so much thought that we just freeze. Whereas if we can find a way, and it's different for everyone how they find that way, but to just relax so that the message or the story can come through you. It almost like takes the pressure off. But like you said, it's also a little weird because you're kind of watching yourself do the thing, right? So then your brain is like, I'm watching myself do the thing, which is kind of weird because it's kind of an out of body experience. What was your structure? Did you write every day?
Well, every week it was about an hour and a half of writing where we would do like a 45-minute stretch, have about a 5-minute break, and then another 45-minute stretch. Okay. And so I would write primarily during those times. And then sporadically throughout the rest of the week, I would edit what I'd written.
Okay.
So it wasn't so much, I know some people like write everything and then go back and edit. It was kind of in real time. I was like, oh, actually this should probably go here, like just changing up where everything was located. Yeah. Or I would go back and be like, wait, I think I already said this. And then going back and seeing what I'd already said, that kind of thing.
And so I often advise people not, because most people who I've talked to cannot edit as they go because it ends up being a procrastination tool. So you have to be disciplined about it, right? If you can go back and then you can force yourself to stay on your writing schedule and know that those 6 days in between are about honing and refining, but now today I'm writing, that works awesome. Most people, they will get stuck in, oh my God, I haven't even said anything good. I don't know where to go from here. Did you have a concrete outline you were working from? How did you decide each week when you sat down what you were going to write about each week without sitting down and going, what the hell do I write today?
Well, I knew on a macro level that I wanted my book to be split into the 3 different like sections or areas of the human. So it was obviously body, mind, and spirit. And so for me, the body part was the easiest to write because that's what I talk about most often. And so that was really easy to get through. And then what I thought was interesting was with the latter 2 parts, it was so funny. Oh my gosh, I have to share this with you. Okay. So obviously, you know that the first book was mostly recipes. Right. And I knew that I had the second book into me coming into last year. And I was kind of like sharing with a few people, well, you know, I'm kind of writing a little bit more and I have this other book I'm thinking about doing. And then I would go to retreats. And at these retreats, like I would make food or like teach people about nutrition and they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing food. Like I saw you make it. Like, how did you make it so great? And then they'd be like, okay, so is this recipe in your first book? And I was like, oh, actually, no, this recipe is not in that book. And then they said, well, you should probably put it in the second book. And I had people tell that to me so many times until it finally clicked. Like, oh, I need to put recipes in the second book. But I linked it to not the body part of the book. I linked it to the spiritual. So the spirit part of the book, because we're connecting the idea of the chakras with certain foods that support that energy.
Oh, okay.
So it becomes this like full circle moment.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And that's unique.
Thanks.
In other words, not to say it's never been done, but that's not normally what you see and what you read is connecting it to the body specifically, not connecting the food to the spirit. Oh, I love that. I love that. What was the hardest part for you beyond the fear of, holy cow, is this going to be well received? What was the most challenging piece of it?
Yeah, for me, the most challenging piece was actually in regards to like meditation and visualization and finding ways to talk about it so that like if you were coming into the book and you're really left-brained, like you're really a logical thinker, I come from an engineering and science background, right? So I have a chemical engineering degree, ended up going into nutrition and learning about like this intuitive spiritual side, right?
Right.
So for someone coming into this book from a very logical mindset, how can I explain it in a way that makes sense? That doesn't seem like it's totally woo-woo. That's not like some crazy thing that this random lady on the internet started talking about, you know? And so finding that research actually helped me to feel more grounded. It helped me to have that evidence to be able to say, you know what, there's actual research that has been done around visualization, why it's so important. But not only that, like delving into the realm of breath work. Why does breath work help the body so much? But not only that, why can you start to see things in your mind's eye when you're deep into like a breath work practice? And so that was a really fascinating thing for me to uncover the science behind it. And then to be able to share that in a way that helped people to understand, like, this is what's happening and don't be afraid of it. It can actually be really helpful for your overall health and well-being.
So why is that actually? Because I've been diving myself into this breathwork thing, and all I keep thinking lately is this is a lot of taxing on my lungs. And a lot of times the instructor, whoever's doing it, wherever I'm doing it, because it's usually an online portal of some sort, and they'll say, feelings may come up. You may start crying. And I'm like, nothing's happening except I feel out of breath. And I'm like, when is this going to be over? Because when the person says, we're going to do this for 6 minutes, I'm like, are you insane? Like, I don't think this is safe. So can you explain that a bit more so that at least I understand? Maybe there's somebody listening who also is, I'm very curious about it. I get the sense of, or I get the concept of, moving that energy through your body, but the rest of it, I'm a little unclear on why energetically or whatever that works.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break it down just in case anybody's never heard of breath work. So obviously we all breathe, right? And hopefully everybody listening to this is breathing, but we do it very involuntarily. And typically we're taking really shallow breaths. So you might notice, for instance, like if you're really nervous about something, you can really become cognizant of your breath and you're feeling it very heavily, like in the chest. So you feel your chest going up and down when you're breathing. So part of breath work is breathing more deeply. And so breathing into your diaphragm, or essentially your belly. And sometimes when we breathe, like we talked about the shoulders lifting, the chest lifting as we inhale. For breath work, we want to try to breathe into the belly and allow the belly to expand as you inhale. And then on the exhale, you're pulling that belly button into the spine to like force all the air out. And so what that is doing is it's helping to oxygenate your blood more. Because otherwise we get used to this state of like very shallow breaths. It helps to increase cortisol, so the stress hormone in the body, which then causes your adrenaline to increase, which then makes you feel like really like flighty during the day. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to do all these things. And, you're very frantic as you're running around. It's very chaotic. Now, compare and contrast that with breath work, where you're taking a minute to really mindfully breathe deeply, re-oxygenating your blood, allowing more oxygen to flow into all of your organs so that they can work better. And when you do that for an extended period of time, it does help to reduce your cortisol. It helps to reduce your adrenaline. It helps to bring on that state of the body that's more about relaxing, more about digesting your food, for instance, as opposed to for instance, when we breathe shallowly, we actually reduce the amount of blood flow to the stomach or to the digestive organs. So high stress can actually cause us to have more digestive issues, right? And I'm sure that people have seen that just, in their regular life. When they're super stressed out, they might have constipation, they might have, massive diarrhea, different things like that. Whereas if we can make time to really breathe, slow down our heart rates, reduce our blood pressure, increase oxygenation, reduce stress, it has an amazing impact on your overall health and wellness. Does that answer your question?
It does. So there's a site that I have a membership to. It's Stevie Wright. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but it's called the Breath Channel. And she has dozens and dozens of exercises that you can do. And so there's breath work for anxiety, and there's breath work for low energy, and there's breath work for like, I don't feel like I like Tuesdays. And there's breath work for everything. And that's the piece where I am not clear on how do these different breathing techniques, into and out one or high and like the way, all the different things, how does that transmute the energy to where it actually begins a healing process?
Okay. So let me answer that twofold. So first, if you're coming into this with your left brain, so really logical, like you like evidence, which is very helpful for me and for many others. So there's actually been scientific studies that have looked at the brain with those different breathing styles to see what happens with hormone levels and fluctuations to your neurotransmitters. And so what I liked about what you said was like when you're breathing in for 2 and you're exhaling for 1, it has a different impact on the body versus inhaling and holding and then breathing out. So they have shown a physiological response, right, which helps to either heighten certain hormones or decrease other hormones. Now, when we look at it from the second standpoint, which is energetically, the thing that I find really important to first point out is when we talk about energy, it can become, I call it blocked or stagnated in the body for a lot of different reasons, right? Whether it be stress or an organ's not functioning properly, or digestively, like you're not being able to use the restroom as much as would be helpful, right? So all these reasons can affect the energy in the body. And so when we breathe and when we're really being mindful about those deep breaths, it's helping to oxygenate the areas of the body where there could be stress, so either physical stress or emotional stress. And then it's allowing the body to release that through the exhales. And so part of it is obviously the physiological inhale, exhale. And the second part of it is the visualization, because our brains are amazing biological computers. And we have to remember that we can program it to do whatever we want. So visualizing wherever it is in the body that you're feeling that stagnation, breathing into it and then visualizing it leaving the body helps to release the energy from whichever energetic center that might be being stagnated at that time.
Okay, so that helped tremendously. And it gave me another question about book writing and your process of book writing. So you are a deep, deep well of information and you're a scientist. So how did you, so let me phrase it this way. A lot of times authors get an idea to write a book and then they go, wait, how do I approach this for people who have no idea, they've never stepped into this space. I don't want to overwhelm them, but people who are advanced in the space, I don't want to bore them. How did you come to a place where you felt comfortable about who your target reader is? Because you're not ever really talking to the masses. You will end up talking to more people than you intend, but it's in my opinion, it's critical to have one, target reader. It's not, you're not writing for everyone. So how did you get to where you were comfortable with that?
Right. So for me, whether it's the writing or talking to people or social media, I'm always trying to make things as simple as possible.
Right.
And this is one of the things that I feel like gets so easily convoluted in life, right? Everyone's trying to give you all these things, all this backup, all the different viewpoints. If we can just make something really simple, it's so much more effective. It's so much more impactful. And so while I was writing the book, it was really about how can I take this paper and boil it down to like a couple of sentences to really make it applicable to a human being that is reading it and is like, okay, I'm kind of interested. I've never heard of this before, but that makes sense. Whilst also including like the references to that paper and saying, if you really want to learn more, this is the link you can use.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's another challenge is sometimes people wonder, well, how far do I dive into this? And if it's not either your area of expertise or your area of interest, then it's great to recommend other resources. If, to say like, this is outside the scope of this particular book, but if you're interested in this, here's something I can recommend.
Exactly. Yes.
What would you what's your biggest recommendation or piece of advice for people who are on the fence about writing a book and they've got this idea in their head. I want to write a book. I want to do this, but what would you say?
Well, I think for me, it's two different things. I'm all about giving extra. So that's why I'm always answering your questions. Like, I've got 12 things I want to say in regards to this question. No, just kidding. Well, I think for me, number one is having clarity, like crystal clear on what your book is about, crystal clear on who you're writing to, just like you said, crystal clear on the message. Like, why is this important? Because anybody could write a book, right? And tons of people do. That doesn't necessarily mean they're amazing books, but anybody could write a book. If you have a particular message that you're feeling called to share, there's a reason behind it. And to be really crystal clear on what that reason is for this book. I know that so many people go into book writing, they're like, this is my passive income stream, And while that's great, that's a great bonus, right? I don't think that should necessarily be the reason why you start a book. There should always be a deeper connection to the book writing process.
Right.
The second thing I would say is, and this is applicable to not just book writing, but to all of life, is feel the fear and do it anyway. Just like I said before, I think it's so important for us to recognize that fear can be the thing that holds us back, or it can be that signal that this is something that we should do. And I think for a lot of people, many people that I've talked to since publishing books have been asking me questions about book writing. And that's one of the most common things, because we're so fearful of trying something new, of getting out of our comfort zone and really diving into this area of life where we've never set foot before. Right. So the idea of, instead of training your mind to feel fear and then to stop, let's instead train our minds to feel fear and then move forward, because with action, obviously anything is possible.
Right. Oh, I love that. And you can move forward a slow step at a time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says that you have to feel the fear and then jump off the building,
Right.
and hope that you're going to grow wings on the way down. Like you can take a small step at a time until you have actually done the thing that you were so afraid of, but you did it somewhat within your comfort zone while moving toward what isn't in your comfort zone.
Right, exactly.
Right? And not making it so are there more books coming, do you think?
That's a great question. I feel like right now, no. I think that it's definitely a mode of communication that I really love. I mean, I love reading books. I have like a stack of books next to me at all times, or like on my Kindle. So I love books. Right now, I don't think I'm in the place where I want to write another book, but that's not to say that in the future, it won't happen again.
Of course. Of course. I'll link in the show notes to all of your sites and everything. What's the best place for people to connect with you? Where are you the most often?
Yes, the most often I'm on Instagram. And so my handle is @nourish_with_Renata. So I'm always on there, and then people can DM me and ask questions that way too.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.